Hi, it's Steve here again from Green Flash, just answering another question that people pose to us all the time, and that is, how much does solar actually cost? Problem is, it's actually the wrong question. A wise man once said, price is what you pay, value is what you get. And this is what I'll be focusing on in answering this question. So in fact, when one starts looking at a solar system for the first time, what should we be looking at to evaluate whether or not to invest in solar? Firstly, one is to avoid load shedding. Number two is obviously to reduce the amount of money that they expend on electricity. And thirdly, simply to be green. Well, all of these are the motivating factors, but one still has to pay for the system. So how does one justify investing a fair amount of money on purchasing a solar system for either your business or your home? Well, firstly, let's look at the facts. What's going on with our electricity supply at the moment? Well, up until 2020, over the last decade or so, we've had over 300% increase in the rates that we've been paying for our electricity. Over the next decade, which takes us to 2030, who knows whether it'll be less, the same, or possibly even more than the 300% increase we've experienced so far. Well, what does the future of Eskom hold? Well, what we do know is that the current CEO is doing a fabulous job. He's already set in motion the separation into three divisions of what used to be the one centrally controlled entity. He's separating them into generation, distribution, and transmission, which is absolutely a step in the correct direction. And he's set in motion a plan to reclaim monies lost in the past and to make sure that budgets are stuck to going into the future. When you hear him talk, he gives an amazing level of confidence in the future of Eskom. The point is that things are getting more and more expensive, and there's no way that energy is ever going to get cheaper. So our best approach is let's look at the math and let that speak for itself. What we do know, we've passed the tipping point, and solar is a cheaper solution to generating power than it is to continue buying power from the state entity. Typically, depending on the size of your system, it takes between 5 and 7 years to pay a system off. Once you've paid off your solar system, your power is free. So does it make sense to go for solar? Well, in our view, it's a no-brainer, because once you've paid off your system, whether you pay for it upfront or whether you finance it via a bond or a loan or a lease or a rental system, once it's paid for, your power is pretty much free. The way we look at it is we've estimated that different components last for different lengths of time. The panels last for 20, 25, maybe 30 years. The batteries depend on how many times you cycle them and the quality of the batteries that you go for in the first place. If you go for a well-respected inverter, one that is usually a low-frequency inverter. Low-frequency inverters are far better quality inverters than the high-frequency inverters. Always a good idea to ask your supplier, is the inverter that you're supplying me a low-frequency or a high-frequency inverter? The low-frequency inverters are more expensive, but they're more resilient and more able to withstand the peaks that we experience off our grid. So if we look at an average lifespan of the entire system as being, let's say, 16 years, maybe it's 15, maybe it's 20, but let's just guesstimate that all the components together will give you a lifespan of 16 years. And it's going to take you between 5 and 7 years to pay off your system. Then you've got a good 10 years of free electricity, and bear in mind that those 10 years are going to be the 10 years after you've paid off your system, when power is going to be far more expensive than it is now. So what is the bottom line? Well, the bottom line is that it absolutely does make financial sense. And let me give you an example. We logged somebody's house the other day, and we found out exactly what they were drawing per day, per month, per year, and we extrapolated that over a projected lifespan of the entire system of 16 years. It worked out that during that time, they would be spending 2.7 million rand paying for their electricity. When we worked out what it would cost them to install a system, and it was a biggish system that they needed for their house, they were substantial users of electricity, it worked out it was going to cost them just over 400,000 rand for their solar system. When you think of it and somebody asks the question, how much is a solar system going to cost me? And you tell them it's going to cost them 400,000 rand. Well, quite rightly, they're in a state of shock, horror. But if you look at it in terms of, okay, I'm going to finance this, or I'm going to pay for it in cash if I've got it. But once it's paid for, you've paid your 400,000 rand. And if it's going to save you 2.3 million rand over the next period of time, well, that's a substantial amount of money that you're not going to be paying. So what it's not costing you is the 2.3 million rand that these people otherwise would have been paying. So again, the age-old question, how much is solar going to cost me? Well, there are other things to look at. You might have a small house with 6 people living in it. You might have a large house with 2 people living in it. You might have a medium-sized house with an average-sized family who are unconscious of their electricity usage. They leave all the lights on all the time and use power extravagantly. And there might be exactly the same family that is very conscious of the power that they use. So it's impossible to say how much is it going to cost. The starting point, of course, is to understand what you're currently using. And then what we always suggest to people is the concept of reduce before you produce. In other words, before you start going out and purchasing a solar system, you first see that all your lights are changed to LED lights, that you're not using your dishwasher at the time when you're paying peak rates. So one's really got to look at the full picture, and one can only get a full picture when you start exploring the situation with your solar provider of choice. A perfect analogy of what a solar cost is to look at solar in the same way as one would look at either owning or renting one's home. Imagine you're 30 years old. Imagine you decide you're going to go and purchase your home. You spend the next 10 or 15 years, maybe even 20 years, paying off your home. At that stage, you're 50 years old. Your home is paid for, and you live for the rest of your life for free in your home. It's exactly the same with power. Either you're going to continue paying ever-increasing rates from Eskom, or you're going to invest in your own self-generating system, pay for it in the next couple of years, and thereafter enjoy free power. So you really have 2 options. One is to be like an ostrich and do nothing for the time being. And sometimes it does take a while for the concept to settle in. And I also would encourage you not to rush into just going for the first solar system from the first supplier. We have some cheat sheets and what to look for in suppliers and how to establish whether your supplier is suitably qualified. So I would encourage you to have a look at some of the other information that we have available before making your decision. Once you've done that and you decide that you are ready to take your first step forward, contact your local supplier, and we wish you good luck for the future. Free power is just around the corner.